Valerie Stone was a master manipulator. Regina Knox thrived on chaos, and Officer Marcus Hale thought he could control them both. But their deadly triangle of secrets, seduction, and betrayal would end in a murder that shocked the entire prison system. In the quiet, forested outskirts of Silver Ridge, a town barely marked on state maps, the Silver Ridge Correctional Facility stood like a scar in the landscape. Surrounded by tall fences lined with razor wire and watched by aging security cameras, it was a place meant to keep secrets locked away. Inmates came and went, guards changed shifts, but life inside followed a rigid rhythm. What no one knew was that beneath this surface of order and control, something was quietly unraveling. Marcus Hale had worked at Silver Ridge for nearly 7 years. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s, he was known among staff as a dependable, if somewhat withdrawn guard. He clocked in on time, took extra shifts without complaint, and never caused trouble. Other guards joked that Marcus probably liked the prison more than his own home, but no one ever pushed for details. He was divorced, had a daughter he rarely spoke about, and lived alone in a rented house just 15 minutes away from the facility. To the inmates, Marcus was a mystery. He wasn't cruel like some guards, nor overly friendly. He simply did his job, eyes always on the floor or the camera monitors. But for 2 inmates in particular, Marcus's quiet nature wasn't something to ignore. It was something to exploit. Valerie Stone had been in Silver Ridge for 4 years, serving a 12-year sentence for fraud and conspiracy. She was intelligent, poised, and manipulative. With a soft voice and calm demeanor, she had a talent for making people underestimate her. Regina Knox, on the other hand, was a sharp contrast, fiery, unpredictable, and intimidating. She had been transferred from a different facility after a violent altercation with another inmate. Serving 20 years for armed robbery and assault, she carried herself like someone who had nothing to lose. At first, the 2 women rarely crossed paths. They lived in different blocks and moved in different circles. But over time, they began noticing something curious. Both had begun receiving small favors, extra toiletries, fresh fruit from the kitchen, even access to restricted areas during cleaning assignments. It didn't take long to trace it back to Marcus. It started subtly. Valerie left a note on her bunk one night after lights out. The next morning, the request she had written, a specific book from the staff library, was sitting under her pillow. Regina tested him next. During a shift in the kitchen, she asked Marcus casually for some aspirin for her headache. An hour later, the pill packet was in her coat pocket. Both women knew what was happening. Marcus wasn't just bending the rules, he was breaking them. And they were the only ones who noticed. For Valerie, it was a challenge. For Regina, it was leverage. Over time, Marcus began seeking them out during shifts. A few minutes of conversation here, a longer than necessary hallway escort there. It was obvious he was getting comfortable, maybe even infatuated. What he didn't realize was that both women were observing him just as closely as he was watching them. They saw the way his hands trembled when he handed them something forbidden. They noticed how his eyes lingered too long when Valerie laughed, or how his voice softened when Regina lowered hers. Each woman in her own way began feeding his fantasy. Valerie wrote him poems and slipped them into the trash he was assigned to collect. Regina would sing to herself when he passed her cell, knowing he'd pause to listen. It wasn't long before Marcus started taking risks, sneaking in items, falsifying work logs, and spending time with them long after other guards had cleared the area. What Marcus didn't know was that Valerie and Regina were no longer strangers. They had found out about each other. And instead of jealousy tearing them apart, it brought them together. They had realized they could control him better as a team. A secret alliance was born, not out of trust but out of mutual interest. They didn't just want Marcus's attention, they wanted power. And together they knew how to get it. No one saw it coming. Not the other guards, not the administration, and certainly not Marcus himself. But within the stone walls of Silver Ridge, a dangerous game had begun, one that would eventually turn deadly. As the strange triangle between Marcus, Valerie, and Regina deepened, boundaries blurred and rules eroded. What had started as small favors escalated into a system of silent transactions. Marcus, once a disciplined officer with a clean record, was now juggling two dangerous secrets. Convinced he could keep them under control, he believed he was in charge. In reality, he was dangling on a string held tightly by two women who had spent their lives manipulating people for survival. Valerie understood Marcus's weaknesses better than he understood them himself. She saw the loneliness in his eyes, the hesitation in his walk, the way he paused when someone mentioned family. She knew he hadn't spoken to his daughter in months and that his ex-wife had filed for full custody. Every time she gave him a soft smile or thanked him in that gentle voice of hers, she was building a foundation of trust. Marcus began spending longer stretches outside her cell, telling her things he hadn't told anyone, how he felt invisible, how the job drained him, how he sometimes thought about disappearing. Regina took a different approach. She didn't coddle him or stroke his ego. She challenged him. She teased him with dark jokes and asked bold questions, often laughing off his discomfort. When she asked him to smuggle in a small bottle of sleeping pills, she made it seem like a dare rather than a favor. He complied. Regina knew he liked the adrenaline, the thrill of doing something wrong and getting away with it. So she gave him more chances to feel alive, more demands that pushed him closer to the edge. Meanwhile, the two women had begun working together, carefully and secretly. In the laundry room and during kitchen duty, they passed notes, plotted strategies, shared intel. At first, they considered cutting each other out, but eventually, they saw the value in combining their strengths. Valerie's manipulation and Regina's intimidation created the perfect storm. Marcus didn't stand a chance. They crafted a system of alternating attention, never letting Marcus feel fully secure with either of them. Whenever he grew too attached to one, the other would reel him back in with a crisis or confession. He was caught in a mental tug-of-war, and each day it pulled him deeper into riskier behavior. He tampered with surveillance schedules to create blind spots. He forged paperwork to change assignment rosters, ensuring the women had more time in shared spaces. He brought in a second burner phone, smuggling it inside a hollowed-out Bible, and gave it to Regina after she claimed she wanted to call her dying grandmother. He never asked for proof. He never wanted to. Then everything shifted. One of the guards noticed something odd during a routine inspection. A contraband list didn't match the actual inventory. A pack of prescription drugs was missing. It wasn't enough to spark a full investigation, but it raised suspicion. Marcus felt the pressure closing in. He became irritable, more paranoid. Every question from his colleagues felt loaded. Every glance from his supervisor felt accusatory. Regina, sensing his nerves, made her move. She told Marcus that Valerie was talking to someone on the outside, that she might be planning to cut a deal. She said Valerie had been writing letters and hiding them under her mattress. Marcus didn't want to believe it, but fear overrode logic. He stopped visiting Valerie. He ignored her requests. When she called out to him during lunch duty, he kept walking. Valerie noticed immediately. And just like that, the balance of power shifted again. That night, Valerie left a note inside the staff break room, tucked inside a vending machine Marcus always used. It contained a single photograph. Marcus's daughter walking to school, taken from a distance. The message scribbled on the back read, "Pick a side, or we both burn." What had been a thrilling secret affair was now a trap closing in. Marcus realized he wasn't in control anymore. He was the bait, the tool, the liability. The very walls he once guarded had turned against him. and he had no idea how far these women were willing to go. The days after Marcus received the photo passed in a blur of dread. Every shift at Silver Ridge felt like a countdown to disaster. He checked over his shoulder constantly, jumped at every buzz of the facility intercom, and barely slept when he was off duty. The image of his daughter, taken without his knowledge, haunted him. He had no idea how Valerie had arranged it. He didn't know who had followed his child or how close they had gotten. All he knew was that he had crossed a line he could never uncross, and now he was being hunted with his own secrets. He tried to confront Valerie, but she refused to speak directly. She avoided eye contact and sent messages through whispered notes or cryptic comments during work duty. The power she held over him was suffocating. She didn't need to raise her voice. She only needed to remind him subtly and repeatedly that his life outside these walls was fragile, and in her hands, Marcus was stuck. If he pushed back, she'd expose everything. If he gave in, she would only demand more. Regina, on the other hand, sensed something had changed. She noticed how Marcus's visits became shorter, how he flinched whenever someone brushed too close. When she confronted him about Valerie, he didn't deny anything. He just stared blankly, as if trying to crawl out of his own skin. That's when she realized the balance had tipped. Valerie had gained the upper hand. Regina had never played second. Not in prison, not in life. She wasn't about to start now. Within a week, Regina came up with a plan. She needed to regain control, and that meant eliminating the threat Valerie had become. She told Marcus she knew how to fix everything, that Valerie was slipping up and it wouldn't be long before she was caught. She hinted that Valerie was keeping evidence, notes, maybe even recordings, hidden somewhere in the laundry room behind the dryers. Marcus knew better than to ask questions. He simply did what she told him. But Valerie had already anticipated this. She was always one step ahead. That same week, a surprise cell inspection was announced. Several contraband items were found in the women's wing. Some drugs, a phone battery, and handwritten letters referencing a relationship with a staff member. The discovery sent shockwaves through the facility. The guards were on edge. The inmates were rattled. And Marcus? He felt the walls collapsing. Valerie's tone changed. She no longer acted like she was playing a game. Her messages were sharper, more threatening. She told Marcus to choose a side, for real this time. Help her, and she'd protect him. Betray her, and she'd go straight to the warden. Meanwhile, Regina had taken matters into her own hands. During her cleaning shift in the laundry room, she set the trap. She waited until lights out. She knew Valerie would be brought in for folding duty after lockdown due to her new work assignment, something Marcus had arranged, believing he was helping Valerie. What happened next was fast and brutal. By morning, the entire prison was in chaos. A body had been found in the laundry room, hidden behind a cart of uniforms. Regina Knox was dead. Her neck showed signs of strangulation, her face bruised, and a bloody fingernail stuck under the collar of her shirt. There were no cameras in that section, and the logbook was missing a page. Marcus stood in the control room, staring at the monitors, pale and silent. He knew exactly what had happened. He had known it might happen, but he had done nothing. He told no one. He pressed no alarm. And in that moment, his silence made him just as guilty as the person who carried out the act. Everything was spinning now, too fast to stop. The prison was locked down. Investigators were brought in. Questions were asked. Alibis were checked. But there were no easy answers, only secrets and shadows. Valerie had made her move. Regina was gone, and Marcus was drowning in the aftermath. The murder of Regina Knox sent Silver Ridge Correctional Facility into a full-blown crisis. Word spread quickly among inmates and staff, even though the administration tried to keep details contained. Rumors twisted the truth into a dozen different versions. Some said Regina was killed over a drug debt. Others claimed it was revenge for a past fight. But underneath all the wild speculation, one truth hung in the air like smoke. This wasn't a random act of violence. Someone had planned it. Warden Ellison, a sharp and no-nonsense administrator with 2 decades of experience, ordered an internal lockdown. Every movement was monitored, every corner searched. The laundry room was sealed off and treated as a crime scene. Guards were pulled from other wings to increase surveillance, and inmates were interrogated one by one. Despite all this, no conclusive evidence surfaced. Regina had no known enemies, none that could be linked directly to her death. The bruises on her body indicated a struggle, and the torn skin under her nails suggested she had tried to fight back. But without video footage, eyewitnesses, or a murder weapon, the investigation stalled. The missing logbook page became a crucial clue, but it too had vanished without a trace. Valerie stayed quiet during the initial wave of questioning. She didn't flinch when her cell was searched. She remained calm, composed, even sympathetic when asked about Regina. To everyone around her, she was simply another inmate trying to keep her head down. But those who watched closely, like Marcus, could see the difference. Her eyes no longer searched the room for danger. She had nothing to fear. She had won. Marcus, on the other hand, was unraveling. His guilt consumed him. He relived the night of the murder in his mind over and over. How he had monitored Valerie's movement, how he had left the door to the laundry room unlocked, how he had looked the other way when she slipped out of the camera's view. He hadn't laid a hand on Regina, but he had opened the path that led to her death. Every shift became a torment. Other guards noticed the change in him. He lost weight. He stopped shaving. He snapped at co-workers and avoided eye contact. When questioned by investigators, he stuck to the basics. He lied by omission, giving vague timelines and pretending he couldn't remember details. But Valerie had made sure he couldn't come clean, even if he wanted to. She still held the photo of his daughter. She still had the letters he had written, evidence that would destroy him if exposed. Then came the breaking point. 2 weeks after the murder, a new guard named Elena Torres, young, curious, and a little too thorough, noticed something odd while cleaning out the staff break room. Behind a loose panel in the ceiling vent tucked inside an empty coffee can, she found a flash drive. She turned it in without hesitation, thinking it might be a misplaced training file. What it contained shocked everyone. Recordings, dozens of them. Audio clips of Marcus speaking to both Valerie and Regina, sometimes late at night, sometimes during off-the-record visits. They were raw, emotional, and damning. In one file, Marcus and Regina argued about Valerie, with Regina warning him not to trust her. In another, Valerie's voice could be heard calmly explaining how certain people in prison don't make it out. But the most chilling recording came from the night Regina died. The audio was muffled but clear enough. There were raised voices, a scuffle, and then a scream. Silence followed. The file ended with Marcus breathing heavily, whispering, "What have I done?" When the warden heard the recordings, he ordered Marcus arrested immediately. Internal Affairs was called in. News of the scandal leaked to the local press, and Silver Ridge made headlines across the state. Marcus confessed to obstruction of justice and abuse of power. He admitted to the affair, to falsifying logs, and to facilitating contact between Valerie and Regina. But when asked directly if he killed Regina, he denied it. Valerie, brought back in for questioning, showed no emotion. Without physical evidence linking her to the scene, and with Marcus taking the brunt of the legal blame, she remained untouched. She was transferred to a higher security wing, but the rumors only grew louder. Some inmates called her the Widowmaker. Others whispered about what she might do next. The prison returned to routine on the surface. But beneath the structure and the noise, everyone knew nothing would be the same again. The system had failed. A guard had fallen, an inmate had died, and another had quietly seized control of it all. The aftermath of the scandal at Silver Ridge Correctional Facility unfolded like a slow-burning fire, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. With Marcus Hale behind bars and the prison administration desperately trying to save face, attention turned to the woman at the center of it all. Valerie Stone. Her reputation had evolved from manipulative inmate to mythical figure. Some believed she had planned everything from the beginning. Others thought she simply took advantage of an opportunity. But one thing was clear. She had survived. Regina Knox was dead, Marcus Hale was imprisoned, and Valerie remained untouched by formal charges. The absence of hard evidence meant the justice system couldn't hold her, even as the moral weight of her involvement hung heavy over the case. Marcus had been sentenced to 15 years after accepting a plea deal. He admitted to providing contraband, falsifying reports, and enabling inmate manipulation. He never wavered from his claim that he hadn't killed Regina. Though prosecutors tried to tie him to the murder, there was too little to go on. His recordings confirmed he had helped Valerie move around unnoticed, but there was no physical proof placing him at the scene during the fatal moment. In the eyes of the law, he was guilty of corruption, but not of murder. Inside his solitary cell, Marcus spent his days in near silence. The man who once enforced order had become another number behind a locked door. He wrote letters to his daughter, though they were never answered. Sometimes he talked to himself, replaying conversations from the past, trying to understand how things had unraveled so quickly. He never spoke Valerie's name, not even when other inmates asked about the headlines. Meanwhile, Valerie was moved to a new facility, a maximum security unit several hours away. There, she remained poised and controlled. She joined a prison writing workshop and started mentoring younger inmates. She kept her head down and rarely spoke about what had happened at Silver Ridge. But the other women watched her closely. Some admired her. Others feared her. Her power didn't come from violence, it came from her ability to outthink everyone around her. Then came the final twist. Months after the dust had settled, a letter surfaced. It had been sent to a local journalist who had covered the case extensively. The envelope contained a scanned copy of a handwritten note dated 3 weeks before Regina's death. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable: Regina Knox. In it, she described the triangle between herself, Marcus, and Valerie. She explained how she had been used, threatened, and manipulated. She hinted that Valerie had spoken about removing obstacles and making sure no one could break the chain. The letter ended with a haunting line: "If something happens to me, look at her, look at Valerie." The journalist published the letter in a local paper. It reignited public interest in the case and sparked renewed calls for investigation. But legally, the letter wasn't enough. It was circumstantial. Without physical evidence or a confession, there was no case to reopen. Valerie's legal team appealed her conviction on unrelated charges. After serving 6 years of a 12-year sentence, she was released early for good behavior and overcrowding. When she walked out of prison, there were no cameras, no reporters, just a quiet exit into freedom. Marcus remained behind bars, forgotten by most. Regina was buried in a modest grave paid for by the state. Valerie vanished into the background of society, changing her name and relocating to another part of the country. Her story became a cautionary tale among prison staff, a whispered legend among inmates. In the end, justice had no clear victor. The system had been outplayed by a woman who understood its blind spots and weaknesses. The truth, buried beneath layers of manipulation and fear, remained locked away, just like so many secrets behind prison walls.